Abdu'l-Baha's life becomes a model for how we are to behave. I mean, we know this and we hear this, the perfect exemplar. Then, of course, this leads into just a few decades later to Shoghi Effendi, who writes what I consider the Bible of the American Baha'i community, which is The Advent of Divine Justice. You must memorize this book, friends, from this cover to that cover, and then read it again. Read it to your children, have them read it to you, have the Baha'i youth share it with their friends. And the focus, of course, is on our mission. And our mission is to teach the African American and the Native American communities. When I first became a Baha'i, one of the things I did was, when I got back to campus, after I was a Baha'i for a month, I had read Baha'i books, but I hadn't really studied them. And so I ordered 4 Baha'i books, and I just sort of buried myself in them for about 2 months. And one of them was The Advent of Divine Justice. The other one was The World Order of Baha'u'llah. And I was completely blown away. I had never read anything about this. And you see these ideas of the Guardian. The Guardian writes as if he's a social scientist. He writes as if he's a social observer, because he's getting all this data from different parts of the world. And then, you know, in retrospect, of course, the Guardian had unpacked implicit bias 70 years before Harvard ever came up with this initiative, its implicit bias test. 70 years. If that's the kind of vision that the Guardian had in that book, it's another reason to go back and read it, because there are all these precious gems in it that that are shared with us from a spiritual point of view. But the next important part, after the responsibilities to pass the message of Baha'u'llah on to Native Americans and African Americans, beyond mass declaration that went on in the 60s and 70s, is what I call the 7-point behavioral model that is contained in that book, that explicitly and basically and clearly explains what Negroes are to do and what whites are to do. We can translate those into the parlance of today: white folks, black folks, white folks, people of color. Those 7 behaviors, with greater clarity than I've ever read anywhere in any kind of writing, tells me exactly what I have to do. Usually inherent feelings of superiority, sometimes subconscious. He didn't choose words like opened up the dictionary and said, oh gee, I like this word. He chose the words very specifically because he understood what was going on in America. I've used them as a coach and a trainer for years. I use them all the time in training sessions. They're infallible. They're absolutely infallible because they get to the very core of how and where we hide. They get to the very core of the games we play. They get to the very core of the ways that we try to avoid dealing with the most challenging issue. He called it that for a reason.